when you consider, okay, let's talk about diet, 'cause we mentioned nutrition, and you consume, you know, food 3 times a day, let's say. But the air you breathe, you're breathing it all day long. You're breathing like 100 times fold, your intake, your ingestion of air is massively bigger than your ingestion of food, right? So we
Yeah.
place all this emphasis on food and supplements, but like we're constantly breathing air.
You're listening to the What the Gut podcast, where busy moms can come for a holistic approach to health and vitality. I'm Allison, your host, a holistic health and wellness coach. In this space, we'll dive into the intricacies of achieving holistic wellness while balancing the demands of daily life as a busy mom. What the Gut is your haven for navigating the challenges that come with juggling numerous tasks while aiming for a healthier, more balanced life. Join me as we uncover practical solutions to common health hurdles, from managing fatigue to understanding all things gut health. Through insightful discussions, actionable insights, and tailored lifestyle strategies, my goal here is to empower you to embrace a vibrant, nourishing life while saying goodbye to being overwhelmed and exhausted. So if you're ready to embark on this transformative journey towards holistic well-being, hit that subscribe button. Get ready to discover the secrets to thriving in motherhood while nurturing your overall wellness. A quick reminder, everything discussed here is for educational and empowering purposes only and is not intended for personalized medical advice. Consult your personal healthcare provider for personalized medical advice. Welcome to What the Gut, where we create our own path to holistic health, one episode at a time. Cathy, welcome to the podcast. I'm happy to have you here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's going to be really fun to chat with you, Allison.
Yeah. So for my listeners, Cathy Cooke is with us today, and she's the founder and owner of Whole Home and Body Health. She is board certified and holistic nutritionist with the National Association of Nutrition Professionals, a certified residential mold inspector, a certified building biology environmental consultant, and certified electromagnetic radiation specialist through the Building Biology Institute. She helps people achieve optimal health by addressing the body, mind, and home. I love that, Cathy, and I got to hear you speak and was blown away with how important our environment is. And I knew these things, but just the impact and how significant it was really eye-opening. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
well, you're right. In our world of health, we don't always look at the environment. So, very important.
Right. I think too, a lot of people, we might look at the environment, but I think it's one of those things where it's like, oh, it's out of our control in a sense. And so I think there's just this, oh, I'm just not going to make it a priority because I can't control so much of it. Right. That's kind of my thought. But tell me a little bit how you got into this. I know that you had an event whenever you were younger and that kind of changed things for you.
Yeah, so I was bit by a tick when I was 12, growing up in Missouri. And then that kind of started a cascade of just weird things. And I did okay for, I don't know, by okay. I mean, I had a lot of symptoms, but I wasn't debilitated like a lot of people are who have Lyme disease or tick-borne illnesses. So I tried to manage my symptoms as best I could, but as I got older, it kept getting worse and worse.
Mhm.
And it came to the point where I was like, I don't know what to do. So, of course, I started researching like we all do, and this topic of EMF kept coming up like over and over. And I was like, I don't know what these invisible weight, like whatever. But finally, I got so desperate. And my main problem was insomnia. Like, I mean, literally could go days without sleeping.
Did you
Um,
know that it was from being bitten by the tick, or you just like put two and two
no,
together like after the fact?
the tick bite was always in the back of my head because I got this like, severe flu right after that. And then I just started having these weird things. And, I mean, this was the 80s and nobody took me seriously. I mean, I kept saying, like, I'm not feeling right. Something's off. I got bit by this tick and everything since then. And they're like, no, it's totally gaslit. Lyme disease doesn't exist in Missouri. I'm crazy, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until maybe around 2012 that I actually had a physician take me seriously, tested me, and sure enough, I had positive bands for Lyme.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, I was just trying to figure out and what could help me. And even after I got the Lyme diagnosis, I still couldn't get a handle on my health and my sleep.
Right.
And so I think the Lyme disease just set me up for a weaker constitution, being unable to handle more exposures, adding more toxins on it. So maybe I wouldn't have been sensitive to the EMF without the Lyme, right? But then what I decided to do was try and minimize my EMF exposure for a week. I committed to a week without a phone and without Wi-Fi, and it was like everything changed.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it was like within a couple days, I was like, oh, I'm sleeping. Oh, I don't have anxiety. Oh, the ringing in my ears is gone. Like, it was crazy. So then I realized, all right, I'm a nutritionist. I'm going to have to help people with their health. Like, we have to know this piece too.
Yeah.
And so I enrolled in the Building Biology Institute, and they teach you everything in the built environment that might be causing health problems. So of course that includes air quality and mold, and that's how I kind of got started.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, for some of my listeners, they might not really know what we're talking about whenever we say EMF. So, when we're talking about EMF, we're talking about the electromagnetic frequencies that comes from electronics in general, like our cell phones, the cell phone
Yep.
towers, the electric cars, and the sleep number beds that we
Mm,
sleep in.
hmm. Those
Yeah,
are huge. I'm
like
glad you mentioned those.
nobody knows how impactful they can be in such a negative way. And Cathy, I know that you do have this unique approach that combines holistic nutrition and with building biology. As far as all the things in our environment, how do our homes impact our health?
It's so big. I mean, not everybody's responding to their homes, right? But when you consider, okay, let's talk about diet, 'cause we mentioned nutrition, and you consume, you know, food 3 times a day, let's say. But the air you breathe, you're breathing it all day long. You're breathing like 100 times fold. Your intake, your ingestion of air is massively bigger than your ingestion of food, right? So we
Yeah.
place all this emphasis on food and supplements, but like we're constantly breathing air, and we're in this EMF soup 24/7, usually if we have high exposure in our home. So for me, like, food is important, but if we're bathing in these other toxins 24 hours a day, like, my food's not going to do a whole lot. I have to get these, air quality and EMF pieces dialed in because it's such a larger exposure every day. And I think a lot of us are overlooking that. I think we are all having negative consequences and negative health impacts of these exposures in our home, but some bodies are more resilient than others, right? Not
Yeah.
everybody is going to be impacted in the same way, but I
Right.
think we could all benefit from cleaning up, our air and our home.
Yeah, for sure. So I know you said like mold and then just the air quality and EMF exposure, but what other toxins should we really be aware of in our environment?
Yeah, so those are the two big ones, but there's a lot of things that many of us aren't considering, like what are we cleaning with, right? Clorox wipes, like everybody loves our bleach and our disinfectants, especially after COVID, like, oh my gosh, we got to sanitize everything. We got to use this spray that says it kills 99% of germs and blah, blah, blah. And if you go to any given store and walk down the cleaning aisle and pick out cleaning products, they're full of toxic chemicals, right? And they have huge impacts on us. So, one, from a microbiome perspective, like we don't want to be killing everything all the time. That's not very helpful. And two, from the chemical exposure, like we're spraying this on our counters or on our tables or on the floors, and we're directly inhaling it.
Yeah.
And most of these chemicals can be endocrine disruptors, right? So
Yep.
they're messing with our hormones big time.
Yep.
They can negatively impact respiratory systems, so we can have, chronic respiratory conditions, asthma, sinus, lungs, as well as mood, can affect memory and cognitive performance, skin issues, like it goes on and on. So, like, why are we doing that? Vinegar works awesome. Borax works great. Hydrogen peroxide is amazing. Like, we have options. We have completely safe options that we should be considering.
Right. I know I talk to some people sometimes about like different cleaning options, and they're like, well, then what do you use? Just be simple. Just be simple. I just use vinegar and water. Like, that's it.
Yeah. Yep.
It doesn't have to be anything fancy.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I love how you pointed out that like the air we breathe, that's so much more impactful to us than the food because we don't eat all day long, but we're
Right.
breathing all day long. I mean, I
Mhm.
haven't thought about it in that way. And that's
Mhm.
just really interesting. So, what can we do about some of these things? Like, I mean, cleaners, obviously, we could switch to like a different option,
Mhm.
a more natural, not so full of chemical type of household cleaner. But what about the air quality and mold and EMF? What are things we can
Mhm.
do for that?
Yeah. So this gets a little bit more complicated, but there's a lot of things you can do. So, I mean, if there's been a known water event in your house or not, or if you're suspicious, if you've got some chronic health issues and you're suspicious of mold or water damage in your house, getting a good inspector to thoroughly look through your house to see if there is a potential problem. Now, that's easier said than done because when I say good inspector, some inspectors are more thorough than others. And most inspectors think that you just go in and take a couple air samples and you're like, awesome, there's nothing in your air. See ya, that's $800 and, you have three samples. Like, no, that does not work. Those air samples can be used strategically and they can be helpful, but you got to have a full inspection. So I'm rarely at a house like on the let's say 1,000 square foot house. I'm going to plan to be there for probably 3 hours ish, and it's going to take longer as the house, with the bigger house. So a 3,000 square foot house, I'm going to say I'm probably going to be there all day, 5, 6, 7 hours. So the inspection should be extensive because I open every drawer, every cabinet, pull up the carpets in the attic and the crawl space. So getting a good inspection means someone who's super, super thorough with the visual inspection. And then aside from that, air purification, I think is great. There's a lot of air purifiers out there. Some are better than others. I don't like all these fancy ions, PCO technology, I don't even know, UV lights, blah, blah, blah. All of that I do not think is
Well, then you
helpful.
get into like different kinds of EMF with that. You might be purifying the air, but like you might have other type of issues with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I actually had a client who had gone through a really extensive mold remediation in her home and got an air purifier and the air purifier was right next to her bed and she didn't know it was emitting a Wi-Fi signal all night long. And she did not, she's like, why don't I feel good? She's
Yeah.
like, we went through and so we had to move the air purifier. And so, right, don't get one that's got Wi-Fi on it. Like that's silly. So carbon and HEPA, good filter with carbon and HEPA is all you need. No Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, none of that fanciness. That can be super helpful. And, I'm a huge fan of opening windows in areas where the humidity is not elevated. Even when it is elevated, opening windows to get an air exchange a couple times a day. Because if you think about it, if you're bringing in chemicals or mold or whatever it is in your house and you're keeping your house shut all day, most people do not open windows. And I'm like, it boggles my mind. Like everything in your house is just trapped in there. So you have to open the windows, get some good cross ventilation so you can have some dilution a couple times a day. You can get an air quality monitor and just see. Like it's not going to tell you about mold, but particulate matter, which is basically, the particulate floating around in the air, which is directly associated with some pretty advanced conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other cognitive issues. Looking at carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, all of these things that you can buy a pretty inexpensive meter and just measure that and see kind of what's going on in your house.
Yeah. And I know you said like a good inspector is going to be super thorough and everything. I remember you talking about mold treatment and how treating mold is not the same across the board. And that just blew my mind because I'm like, I'm pretty sure we have mold in our house. We live in Mississippi. It's so humid
Yeah.
here. And it's like, I just feel like it's inevitable. But I'm like, we need to get it treated. But then I always remember what you said in the back of my head. And I'm like, but not everybody's the same. I just need Cathy to come here. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, not everybody treats it the same. It might be worse if they come treat it. Like, I don't know what to do. So, how does somebody know if they're going to be treating it the right way or not if they do
Yeah.
have like mold in their house?
Well, so you want to talk to the if so some people choose to do it themselves, which I support if they are really educated on the principles and are protecting themselves. Because sometimes you can do it better than a remediation company will. To your point, because what most companies do is they're like, awesome, you've got mold, we're going to come in and treat it with this fancy chemical, which is not helpful at all because the point is not to kill the mold. When you kill mold, it becomes more cytotoxic, right? It releases more mycotoxins. And dead or alive, the mycotoxins are there. So the point is to remove it. So if you're hiring a remediation company, you just want to ask them, what's your process? And if they say, oh, we use an antifungal or we fog or blah blah blah, you go, no, I just want you to follow the industry guidelines, which say to remove it. We just want to remove it, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it gets a lot more complex than that, but that's the basic
Yeah.
premise. Like, don't put bleach on it. And I get it. Like, I grew up that way too, and that's what most of us think. Like, you bleach it or you whatever, you put a chemical on it. And maybe that does work for bacteria or, other microbes, but mold is a different thing. So
Yeah.
we're not gonna put chemicals on it. We're just gonna get it out of the house.
Yeah. So, speaking of mold, how significant is mold in contributing to some like into chronic health issues? And what are some of the signs that somebody might have if they have mold in their house?
Gosh, I mean, there's no system of the body that mold doesn't impact, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of us, we're specialists in maybe gut health or hormones or brain or skin or fertility or whatever, but mold will impact any of it, all of it, and everyone's presentation is different. So some people, maybe they just get a little eczema. Some people lose their hair because it impacts their thyroid. Some people have fertility issues because it can bind to hormone receptors. Some people have liver issues. Some people get lung infections, like rage, I mean, it's like crazy what mold can do because, mold's job is to decompose things, right? So it's like in your body trying to decompose you, which is
Yeah.
kind of terrifying. And so it's challenging because what else could cause those problems? You name it, right? Like
Yeah.
stress and diet and toxins, and I mean, so many things. So it's challenging to know for sure, but there are lab tests. There's mycotoxin urine test, there's the Shoemaker panel, there's the cell core questionnaire, which can be helpful. There's IgG and IgE testing. So there's multiple different ways that you can test to confirm if you've got mold illness. However, some of these tests like the urine mycotoxin test, which a lot of us use, that can come back looking perfectly fine in the beginning because if you're so sick that your body is like not detoxifying and it's just kind of holding on to whatever because in its body it's trying, or in its wisdom it's trying to protect you, then the mycotoxins aren't going to come out and they're not going to show up on
Right.
that test necessarily. So that's a little tricky. You can provoke it in certain ways depending on the lab to help it look more representative. So, a good practitioner will kind of put all the pieces together. Let's talk about your symptoms. Let's do the questionnaire. Let's talk about your house. Let's talk about, have you ever lived in a moldy place? And let's, do testing if we want to confirm.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. have the same type of question with EMF. I think it can kind of affect everything across the board as well. But how does EMF exposure affect our health, or what are some other ways that we can take to reduce the EMF exposure in our home?
Yeah. Well, I love this question because it's much simpler. It's much easier to deal with an EMF problem in a lot of ways than it is a mold problem because we're voluntarily bringing these things into our house, right?
Yeah.
So, so from a health perspective, one of the main ways we know that it impacts us is, all of our cells are not our red blood cells, but all the other cells are controlled by these voltage gates. So we have these voltage gated calcium channels, which, our body's electric. It communicates electrically and it tells these voltage gates open a little bit because I need a little bit more calcium in here, right? And then it'll let a little calcium in. But when we're in these fields of these human made EMFs, these voltage gates can get stuck open. And then we can get this flood of calcium ions in there. And then we can get peroxynitrite, which means reactive oxygen species in oxidative stress. And then what does oxidative stress mean? Well, it depends on the person. It can present in many different ways. Could be DNA breaks, could be double strand, single strand DNA breaks, could be proliferation of cell growth, which is cancer. It could be, insomnia, irritability, muscle weakness, heart palpitations. Like, again, it can kind of go anywhere depending on the weakness of the person. So there's also some research showing that it can act as an antibiotic. So it can kill the bacteria. And we all know these days antibiotics aren't awesome. So this
Yeah.
EMF can impact our microbiome. It can negatively impact the blood-brain barrier. So if we're weakening the blood-brain barrier, and now we've got those toxins coming to our
Yeah.
brain, like, oh man. So it can be pretty profound for some people. So how do we manage that? Well, we get rid of everything in our house. Not really, but I mean, some of it is like there's plenty of things in our house that are completely unnecessary that have these signals. Like a couple weeks ago, I did an assessment and I found a radio frequency signal on the refrigerator, which a lot of refrigerators have, but they're like, no, we never turned it on. That's not it. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you've turned it on or not. It is emitting, waiting for you to connect to it. So we got online, we figured out with this specific refrigerator how to remove the antenna. Took us about 20 minutes. We pulled it out, boom, we're done. Right? Like there are easy solutions like that where if a device has something, we can sometimes just remove the antenna and it's done. We can hardwire the internet, which is like the number one thing that most people should be doing because that's going to reduce your exposure the most, generally speaking. Most people's biggest exposure is their router. It's not hard to hardwire. I'm talking to you right now on a hardwired computer. I do it all day long, like, not a big deal. We can identify some of the other things that we bring into the house that we don't know about. Of course, that takes a meter, but I mean, I found it on stuffed animals, water softeners, washing machines, tampons, believe it or not. Like,
What?
yes, yes, because it tells you when to change it. Like, I don't, it's ridiculous. It's
Okay,
ridiculous.
so like, what are you talking about?
So it's just a regular tampon, and it's just got a little sensor like at the bottom of the string, and it will send a message via Bluetooth to your phone.
I've never heard of that.
I
Wow.
know. I don't think they made. I don't think
They weren't very
it was very
popular.
popular, right?
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's wild. So in anything they can put a Wi-Fi signal on, they will because, well, one, it's going to track your activity, which is better marketing, right? So there's money in that.
Yeah.
And then people buy it because people like it because, oh, I can connect to my phone, like my oven or my grill or my fireplace, or I don't, it's nuts.
So, gosh, I'm
I
just
know.
thinking now. I'm like, oh my goodness, like maybe my environment's so much worse than I thought. Like,
Well, I don't want to freak people out like that, right? But
well,
definitely
right,
not that.
but
We
it
should be
just
aware.
makes you to be more aware for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts on like sleeping with your aura ring? or your Apple
Yeah,
Watch?
I mean, I've got one, right? But
Okay.
it's on airplane mode. Yeah, you've got the same one.
Yeah, this finger then. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an airplane mode. So
Okay.
it doesn't matter. Like I'll sync
Right.
it in the morning, right?
Okay.
And then, I mean, Aura Ring's the only one I know of. I think there might be a few more, but that you can actually turn off the signal, which is awesome. But the other wearables, fitness trackers,
Got to be
I,
careful. Yeah.
I mean, wearables for me are kind of a hard no because you're putting
Yeah.
it on your body. I do understand like some people have continuous glucose monitors. I understand that that's important for some people, and if you have to do it, like you have to do it, of
Well,
course.
and there's pros and cons. Like, I mean, you might be exposing yourself to the EMF, but you're not going hypoglycemic or something.
Right,
So it's
right,
like,
exactly.
you have to pick and choose.
Yes.
But wow, now I'm thinking about like everything.
Mm.
I'm like, what can I
Well,
do?
yeah, I recommend people get a meter so you can track down, some of those
So
sources.
where do you get a meter? Like what? Like I'm sure you can just get it on Amazon, but like what
Don't go to
kind of
Amazon.
meter? Okay, so then I say wrong, but like that's
Well, you
fine.
can, but you get what you pay for, right?
Yeah.
So if you want, I mean, I've got a handout of the meters that I recommend and their different price points because that way you can match your budget to the best. Because if you go on Amazon and just get some meter, I don't recommend that.
That's
They're
just
not
gonna
all
cause
good.
some problems
Yeah,
probably, so
they're not all good. They're not all good.
okay. Well, then I'm glad I asked. Gosh, that's interesting. On the topic of mold, though, I'm curious. I know in our bathroom, we probably have mold. Like I can smell it. Like I know it's there. I think in my head, I'm like, even if we got this treated appropriately or removed, like it's gonna come back. Like, what's your thought on things like that? Like where you have like a bathroom where, or like, I mean, we're in Mississippi, it's like 100% humidity. Like,
Yeah,
what,
yeah.
I mean, what do you do?
Well, it shouldn't come back. So mold has to have water, right?
I
No
think there's a leak.
water, no mold. So where's the water coming from? We have to stop the source of the water, right? So if there was a leak, well, we fix the leak, right? And then it won't come back.
Fix the
And
leak, remove the mold.
right, right.
Okay.
Fix the leak, remove the mold. If it's a humidity issue, then we have to look at ventilation. Am I running the bathroom fan when I'm showering? Is the bathroom fan working? Um, I've got a couple quick videos on my Instagram account where I'm showing how to test the bathroom fan because a lot of them just aren't sucking. They don't have enough suction power, so it's like doing nothing.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure ours is like barely functioning.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know really. So
Yeah.
you can just throw, like, if it can hold a piece or two of toilet paper, then great. But if it can't hold that, it's not doing anything. So maybe you need a new fan. Maybe you need to crack a window. Maybe you need a dehumidifier in there, right?
Yeah.
So where you live, you might need dehumidifiers throughout the house
Mhm.
to capture some of that excess humidity. Of course, the air conditioning will help to lower the humidity as well because the cold
Yeah.
air. So, this gets into like building science, which is very complex and complicated because there's numerous variables. But we need to look at the ways of how we can manage humidity with those ways that I mentioned, as well as if whatever's going on in your bathroom and you can smell it, we got to fix the source of the water,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I'm wondering, in your practice, have you found any particular building material or household products that are especially more prone to holding on to mold or anything like that?
Yes, that is a great question. Building materials are very important. So, drywall is one of the worst because it's paper. It's got paper on it. And, mold's job is basically to, decompose trees. But if you're ever, hiking in a forest and you see a tree laying on the ground, it takes years, even decades sometimes for that tree to fully decompose because mold will release enzymes to slowly break that down, but it doesn't have teeth, right? You can't just like eat it. But if you turn that tree into paper, it's just like our food, highly processed food. Like we can consume sugar like that, right? But if we were eating like a piece of fruit, it's a little different. So if you took the paper and gave it to mold, oh my gosh, it goes crazy. It's so much easier for it to consume.
Mm.
So the paper on the drywall is big. So you can build with paperless drywall or water resistant materials like in wet rooms like bathrooms. There's things like Ouija board or the Schluter system, which are not paper, but they're waterproof backing. So yeah, other building materials like, tile is good in a large format. I don't like the tiny little tiles because then the grout fails and then water gets in through the grout. But large tile is much better. I mean, there's so many manufactured wood products these days, which again, it's a processed wood. So in the houses, like the older houses I see with like hardwood floors, so much better than these some of the newer, kind of OSB or manufactured wood products that are cheap and they get water and they just absorb it like a sponge. So there's definitely better building materials than others. And, we could spend all day talking about
Yeah,
that, but it is something to consider for sure.
that's interesting. Yeah. So, my last question, Cathy, is for people who are just beginning to really explore the idea of like holistic health and really getting into taking care of themselves more, and now maybe listening to this want to take care of their environment. What piece of advice would you give them on where to start as far as making their home healthier?
Yeah, good question again. So I would say, let's go for the low-hanging fruit, right? We don't need to build a brand new amazing house today, but if we can turn our Wi-Fi off at night, if we've got it, awesome. If we can not sleep with our cell phone, great. Like, put your cell phone in airplane mode at night if you can. If you can hardwire your internet, again, it's like it's not that hard. I've got an article about it on my website. Check that out because you can do it yourself. It doesn't cost that much. That would be amazing. Get an air purifier in there or get some windows open so you can dilute the air. Be mindful about what you're bringing into the house. Be mindful about the cleaning chemicals. I used to love thrift stores. I love a good bargain and finding cute old, eclectic things. But knowing what I know now, I don't shop there anymore because I have no idea where this cute shirt has been, what kind of moldy house it's, furniture, no way. Like, so, those things have minimal financial costs and minimal effort to really just start like right now, just to reduce your exposure today. And then as you get comfortable with that, you can kind of, do more when you feel ready and when you've got the finances to do it.
Yeah, yeah. I know it can be overwhelming at first. So
Yeah,
thank
it
you for
really can.
those tips. That's a good place to start. Well, Cathy, this has been a really awesome podcast. I really appreciate you being here today. Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, just kind of like you said, certainly don't want anyone to get overwhelmed with this or start stressing about it. Like that's definitely not what we want. But taking, taking those little steps now over time eventually make huge impact. So I didn't get everything hardwired, immediately in my house and the air purifiers and, all the things. Like it took me some time, but I'm here now and it's awesome. And I feel better today than I have in decades. So it's worth a little bit of effort. And, you can always reach out to people like us for help if, you need a little bit more inspiration and a little bit more guidance. And yeah, Allison, I just want to thank you for helping to educate your audience about these important topics and getting the message out there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Cathy. This has been awesome. Thank you for being a part of my journey on What the Gut podcast. For a deeper dive into today's topics, head over to allisonandwellness.com/whatthegut or find the detailed show notes linked below. Hey, and don't miss out on future episodes. Hit that subscribe button, and if you love this one, please leave me a review. Let's keep the conversation going over on Instagram. Connect with me and stay updated and engaged with my awesome community. Plus, share these valuable insights with your tribe. They deserve to feel as amazing as you do. You can find me at Allison_and_wellness on Instagram. Your support means the world to me. I'm looking forward to our next awesome chat. But until then, stay curious, don't drink too much coffee, keep the vibrant energy flowing, and take care of your gut. Catch you real soon. Oh, and hey, if you're ready to dive deeper into personalized wellness, check out my one-on-one health coaching program at AllisonandWellness.com. Let's make your journey to holistic health truly transformative.